Hey guys, welcome to Diablo the Primordial 2.0. This video is the continuation video after a Demon's Dungeon. So if you have not watched it, then please watch it, the link is in the description. And please check out my second channel Top Anime Sensei for the light novel of Tenshura. So without any further delay, let's start. But before we start, please like, subscribe and press the bell icon so you don't miss the updates. There are no records of the destruction of skill books other than the only known method. While they were incredibly rare and pricey on their own, they were crucial for demons desiring to create an eternal dungeon. They were both used as tempting lures for explorers and excellent binders of dungeons. The dungeon it created was fairly new and weak thanks to its current power. It figured that it could only kill a few regular non-combatant humans at a time with the dungeon. It didn't want strong explorers to discover the dungeon to take its book, so it opted a safer method, luring kids in it. Dungeons were crucial to a demon's state of being. It was able to trap souls, which would then be used to strengthen the demon owning it, which in turn would strengthen the dungeon, and so on. The lesser demon grinned maniacally at the entrance, waiting for its next soul. It suddenly heard footsteps from the back and quickly reverted to a more human form. It turned around to see a blue-haired beautiful woman. It realized it was the same woman who came in the village with the boy it just kicked in. It had briefly observed the woman back then. The demon found out that the woman was always smiling whenever it observed her, or at least had her lips curled up a little. It was honestly a little unsettling. It wondered why none of the other humans seemed to notice. But what was weirder now was that she was no longer smiling, her lips not even a little bit curled upwards. She stared blankly into its eyes, showing no obvious emotion. From what it had also observed was that the woman always carried her curved wooden sword, which sent warning signals in its head. The woman was strong. It had to lure the woman further from its dungeon. It doubted the dungeon would last against her. If she were to find out about it in the dungeon, then it would have to find a new body and main component. With so many thoughts running through its mind, the lesser demon forgot to even consider how she had found it in the woods. It started to play its role as a little girl and greeted her, only to be pinned by the neck on a nearby tree. "You don't fool me, imp," the woman said softly in a deadpan manner. Her golden gaze still seemed empty as it gazed back. Just as her hand began tightening around its neck, it began thrashing and clawing at her hand to no avail. Its perverted form unraveled. As she kept tightening its neck, it started to feel pain. It was confused. Possessing a mortal didn't allow it to feel the body's pain. So why was it suddenly paled? Its body started shaking. It had just realized something. The woman, she was squeezing it down to its soul. It finally realized that this woman was not really human. It tried to speak, tried to beg for her to stop, else its own soul would break, but having its throat squeezed made it hard to do so. Tears started forming in its eyes, silently staring, as if begging to the woman's eyes. But her eyes remained blank, empty. No, empty wasn't the right word to describe it. What would be most suiting was abyssal. The woman's gaze felt like an unending abyss. The woman, no, the abyss suddenly spoke, her voice still calm. "You think you can lay a hand on my boy?" She leaned closer to its ear, "and get away with it." It tried the hardest it ever had to shake its head, to beg for forgiveness, for mercy. But mercy didn't exist in the abyss. Nothing did. The abyss suddenly closed its eyes, and a few moments later it called out, "Diablo. Kyukaku, I am here, my master." Terror. Absolute terror. That was the only word it could describe itself feeling right now. How could anybody not know his name? He, the one who painted himself as fear incarnate. He, the one who slaughtered mortals and demons alike. He, the one who damned the world with unending pain and suffering. There was no way, yet it could feel his soul, his power. There was no mistaking it, for the demon of black had once again descended to the mortal realm. He needed to calm down. He needed to, else the whole world would die from his power leaking. He mentally sighed in relief. He looked at the damned insect sobbing and choking in front of him. It dared to harm his student. There was no need for mercy. He closed his eyes. Inside his own soul, he felt the countless strings attached to him. He flew over his sea of consciousness until he found the particular string he'd been searching for. And then he pulled. "Diablo," Rimuru called out his name. "Kyukaku, I am here, my master." Diablo answered his call immediately. His heart filled with joy to be of use to his now finally reawakened master. The demon god looked over to the sorry sight in front of his master. A lesser demon disguised as a little girl, its face a mess and it had liquid dripping from between its legs. "Interrogate this thing." His almighty master unceremoniously threw the thing his way, and he grabbed it. It looked at him, and he could see its terror-stricken on its face. He grinned. "We will have a great time, you and I, Kyukaku. Kuahaha," he said as he disappeared along with it. Rimuru looked at the mound's entrance. "Master, that was unnecessary. You could have just asked me for information." "I know, Seal," he repeated. "I know." Seal didn't reply. An instant later, he received all the information he needed from his strongest subordinate. He finally calmed down after processing the contents. He was finally able to look at this on the bright side. The dungeon, while still dangerous for a normal human, could prove a suitable challenge for the boy. Jack would most likely be happy about the reward he'll get completing this dungeon. But that won't stop Rimuru from giving him punishment for the proverbial heart attack the kid almost gave him. Jack better be prepared, because the dungeon would be the least of his worries if he knew what his teacher planned for him. The boy dodged a whooshing sound he heard from behind. Then the next, and the next, and the next. He couldn't find an opening to attack. Heck, he couldn't even attack. The boy kept weaving through the red dots in the complete darkness. He couldn't tell what they looked like. He only knew the sound indicated they were pointy. He couldn't dodge them forever. He wanted to see them all, but couldn't. That brought him into his thoughts when he saw his teacher's attack. He didn't use his eyes to see, yet he could remember it vividly, recalling everything his amazing teacher did before he fell unconscious. It was the clearest he'd ever heard something. Swerve right, swerve left. Forwards, backwards. He continued dodging. But before that, his acute sense of hearing proved useless in a noisy situation. It felt like he didn't have enough ears to discern the swarm. Ears. Rimuru had taught Jack a few things about sounds during their travels. She had explained that sound was just like the waves in the sea, and that the ears were able to capture these waves and transfer it into his head, where it was automatically translated to what he understood as sound. He felt like he needed more ears. He thought over it. If ears could detect waves, then shouldn't his skin also be able to do so? He dodged more attacks. He focused hard on his ears and on his skin. He tried very hard to compare both senses, but couldn't find any similarity. He grit his teeth. It wasn't the time to doubt himself. Last time he did, he spent hours trying to evade endless attacks before learning his lesson. Granted, his teacher wasn't around right now and likely wouldn't be for a while. He focused within himself. In his time of practice, he was somewhat able to bring himself into the flow state. He began entering the state, concentrating on the two senses as his body almost instinctually dodged more attacks incoming. With the flow state, he was able to concentrate better, and after a long while, when he became weary and tired from all the dodging, something deep within his mind clicked. He was able to see inside of him two separate strings, one connected to his ears and the other to his skin. He pulled on them and tied them together, and it was then that he could finally see. The room was cavern-like, with a tunnel leading to another room. In this room, he saw rabbits with drill-like singular horns on their foreheads jumping at him, trying to attack him. One jumped at him, and he quickly decided to grab it by the neck. His teacher had taught him how to kill small game by snapping their necks. This wasn't the first time he did it, so he was able to finish it off quickly. He then did it to the next one before grabbing both by their heads and using them as makeshift dual-piercing weapons. With them, he counterattacked. Every time he lost his grip in his weapon, he quickly grabbed a new one and broke its neck, replacing the old one. He did this until all his attackers were dead. Ha, ha. He breathed heavily and sat down on the floor. As he relaxed, he heard a voice. Skill obtained, Sonic Replicator. The skill's knowledge flew into his mind. After a few minutes, he was able to understand its effects. Its effects were echolocation, the ability to make a mental map of a nearby area centered around him through sensing vibrations. Mimicry by sound, the ability to sense and copy a movement a target makes through sound. Vibration sensor, the ability to sense and translate vibration through more than one sense. He stilled for a minute. Then, he jumped with joy. Skills were incredibly rare to gain. Even just having one could be a life-changing event. But having two skills, well, that was practically unheard of. As he was jumping with joy, his legs suddenly gave in and collapsed. He forgot to pay attention to his fatigue. He was very tired and sluggish right now, but he knew he couldn't rest until he was sure he was safe. Teacher practically nailed that lesson into his head. He scanned the room one more time, but this time he tried with clicking his tongue. The result was just as excellent. So freaking cool, the boy exclaimed inwardly. He was able to discern he was in a cave, and he was able to sense an opening, a tunnel leading to another room. He stood up and walked cautiously towards the room, his corpse's weapons still in his hands. When he reached the room, he clicked again. The result was similar to the first room. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching. And if you guys have not watched my other videos, then please watch them. The links are in the description. And don't forget to like, subscribe and press the bell icon so you don't miss the updates.